Quick video about flow restrictors for reverse osmosis. Well, or to flush ones. You can see this is a flow rate 300. A lot of people think that the restriction control in this is actually adjustable with that nut there. In fact, it's not. What governs the restriction flow inside these units, here's one that went faulty. This is why you should change them every 2 to 3 years, probably even sooner. As you can see, this one's had the screw taken out, a little tiny hole down the bottom there. And if you look carefully in this one, which hasn't been opened, there's two little tiny, you can see those like wires. It looks like a paper clip. And when it's removed, you tend to think it is a paper clip, but it's actually not a paper clip. This is what it looks like when it's removed. As you can see, it's looks like a piece of paper clip bent round. It's actually not. If you turn it and have a look very carefully, see if the camera can pick it up. There you are. I picked it up a couple of times there. You can see it's actually a micro bore tube. And that micro bore tube goes and sits down inside that tiny little hole down the bottom there. When the tube's not in, you have a flow rate of about 700 milliliters, so anywhere between 600 and 700 milliliters per minute coming out of that tiny hole. When this little micro bore tube fastened to the top little cap screw is placed down inside the hole, let's see if we can get it placed down inside there. Obviously it has to go into that tiny hole at the bottom, but what it does is the water comes up the little microtube around the U-bend and then back out. That's what causes the restriction of flow on I can't get it in at the moment because I haven't got the little plastic cap. But that's what causes the restriction. It's not actually adjustable where you can turn it up or down or whatever and it affects the flow. It doesn't. All it does is go into that tiny hole and cause the restriction to come through the microbore tube and then back out the U-bend. That's how that works. And obviously when this actuates, what it actually does is the water flows round the back. If you can see in here, can't really see it through the plastic, but the water sort of comes in, flows around the back of the membrane, not through the center. Then what happens is when this actuates, it pulls the system upwards like that and then allows the water then to transfer. Instead of going around the center hole piece like that, which then goes through the microbore tubing up and out that way, what it actually then does is opens up and it allows the water to piss out on the top and then go straight out that way. And as you can see, you've got arrows on it, telling you which direction it goes. But effectively the water siphons around the back. There's another vessel at the back where that tiny hole is, and then comes out the tiny hole. So it sort of comes in, goes around, comes out the tiny little hole, up round the little microbore tubing, out of the microbore tubing and out the center. Then when the valve actuates, it turns the central piece on and bypasses the little avenue that goes around the back. So if you can imagine, there's an outside vessel there, and let's get a pointer. As you can see, there's an outside vessel around there, and that's where the water pressurizes, which then comes through that little tiny pinhole and then out there when it's actually in restricted mode. When it's in full flow mode, it basically opens up and allows the water to come into the central portion and then straight out, so you get a full flow out. But that is how it works. I'm trying to do this through the camera, and as you can see, that is how automatic flow restrict works. If you wanted to open this up, you wanted to run 100 gallons a day or something like that, just take out the little tiny microbore and put the screw back in, and then you'll get a flow of over 600 millilitres a minute coming out when it's restricted. And obviously, as I say, you'll have the normal 300 millilitres for the duration of 18 seconds while it's actually open. But it's normally closed, and then obviously when the power is placed on it, it actually actuates, and that actually opens it up, which gives you the timed thing. And then when it turns off, it returns into restricted mode. So it's actually naturally without power in restricted mode. So that is the way it works. Obviously this is a brand new one, as you can see. You've got the little microbore, U-bended microbore tube down in there, which of course works exactly the same way, as you can see. And obviously the diaphragm that goes up and down, that pulls up and down or whatever, you can see the rubber seals to it around the plastic there, and then that obviously just pulls it up and down and diverts the water from either around the outside vessel, or when it plunges it or pulls itself up, it then allows the water to come into the inside vessel and straight out without passing the restriction portion there. Obviously the valve membrane, as you can see, is up at the top there. But that is how they work. So they're not adjustable. You either have restricted flow to about 600-700 millilitres a minute, or you have restricted flow, which is about 300 to 350 millilitres per minute, obviously depending on pressure. When these are, you take the tubes out, your operating pressures generally drop to about 60 psi. When you restrict on 300 millilitres, which is with the little microbore tube in storage, you operate in about 80 psi, and that's on a pumped unit, because obviously this is a powered unit, and you know you'd want this powered unit because you're using the same power that you're powering your pump to power all this. So, and that's it, and that's how they work. So yeah, if you've got a 300 mil and you want to up your gallons per day membrane, then remove the microbore tube from this screw here, and then you can run like 100 gallon, 75 or 100 gallon per day. Obviously it's good to run 4 to 1. On a 4 to 1, 75 gallon per day membrane is better suited at approximately 700 to 750 millilitres of water per minute, so it can actually flush the membrane properly. And obviously operating anywhere about 50 to 60 psi, possibly 70 if you want to push it, but that's where you're pretty much laying on there. Now obviously if you're running a 50 gallon per day or lower, you want a restriction of approximately 300 to 400 millilitres per minute for that membrane. It's generally operating either 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, and the microbore tube can stay in there. So, but that's basically the way it is. So yeah, anyway, speak to you again.